Today, you understand birth as a perfectly safe medical procedure. You are born in a bright, warm hospital. You are surrounded by machines and medical experts. But go back 100,000 years. No lights existed, no doctors existed, no incubators existed. Only the cold, dark night, the deep forest, and the terrifying howling of wild predators. In this brutal, primitive world, a human baby is born completely useless, unable to walk, fight, or even hold on. And yet humans still reproduced. Imagine the darkness. The deep, heavy darkness before fire became our permanent shield. You are surrounded by the vast, ancient forest. You feel the crushing cold. You hear the snapping of dead branches. The howling of hungry wolves echoes deeply through the giant trees. In this brutal world, survival meant absolute readiness. They watched the wild horses. A foal drops to the earth wet and trembling. Within a few short hours it stands. Within a single day it runs alongside the massive herd, fleeing from the hungry jaws of wild predators. They watched the deer. A fawn is born camouflaged, perfectly silent, instantly attuned to the hidden danger carried by the harsh, biting wind. They watched the wild dogs. Pups entered the harsh environment with instincts sharp enough to hide safely in the deep brush. Every single creature entered this brutal world physically equipped to either fight or to flee immediately. Then they looked at their own kind. A human baby is born into the cold dirt, completely and entirely helpless. It cannot stand. It cannot walk. It cannot run. It cannot even cling tightly to the warm chest to escape the sharp teeth lurking in the deep shadows. It only knows how to cry, and a loud cry in the ancient forest was a deadly beacon. It was a clear signal to the hungry darkness that a fragile, defenseless meal had finally arrived. If left entirely alone on the frozen ground, a human infant would simply wait to slowly perish. To the unforgiving wilderness, this tiny child was completely useless. It was nothing but a terrifyingly heavy burden in a desperate place where heavy burdens always meant certain, immediate death. The physically weak were quickly eaten. The slow were ruthlessly hunted down. That was the law of the forest. To escape the ruthless law of the forest, humanity did something completely unprecedented. They stood up. They lifted their hands away from the cold dirt. Walking entirely on 2 feet allowed them to see over the tall, swaying grasses of the ancient world. It freed their hands to grip sharp stones. It allowed them to carry the sacred fire. Standing upright made them the undisputed masters of the wild. But this profound triumph came with a devastating biological price. As they walked on 2 legs, the hidden architecture of the human body fundamentally shifted. The pelvis had to change its shape to support this new upright walking posture. The hips significantly narrowed. The vital bone structure tightened. The birth canal was mercilessly squeezed. At the exact same time, a second, equally powerful revolution was happening. The human brain was rapidly expanding. To conquer this harsh and unforgiving world, they desperately needed intelligence. The skull grew larger, thicker, and much heavier. A massive, growing brain was now trapped inside a shrinking, narrow passage. The trap was set. Science now calls this the obstetric dilemma, a cruel, inescapable twist of evolution. To become the smartest creature on Earth, humanity had to gamble with its own survival. In the animal kingdom, birth was often a quiet, instinctual passing. For humans, it became a brutal, bloody terror. They watched in horror and wondered. Why did bringing forth new life suddenly mean agonizing death? A baby could easily get trapped. A mother could quickly bleed out. Both could die screaming in the dark. Nature had to force a terrifying compromise to solve this fatal contradiction. If the baby stayed safely in the womb until it was fully developed, the giant skull could not pass through the narrow bones. Neither the mother nor the child would survive the night. Therefore, the infant had to be violently pushed out prematurely. It had to be born long before its brain was finished growing. It had to be pushed out into the freezing darkness long before its body was capable of fighting back. But the crushing bone of the narrow hips was only half the terrifying trap. The true limitation was not simply physical space. The true limit was the very fire of life itself. It was the absolute boundary of human endurance. Inside the dark warmth of the mother, a silent, unseen battle for survival continuously raged. The human female body is a magnificent, burning furnace. It constantly consumes vast energy to walk, to heal, to survive the bitter freezing cold, and to build the heavy flesh and blood of the new life growing within her belly. But a human brain is a ravenous, greedy machine. As the child grows, its massive, demanding brain pulls more and more fuel from the mother. It rapidly drains her warmth. It relentlessly drains her strength. The mother pushes her ancient body to the absolute edge of biological exhaustion. She gives everything. She bravely burns every single hidden reserve to sustain creation. But eventually, a critical biological breaking point is reached. The mother simply cannot consume enough food in the wild, primitive forest to keep the vital furnace burning for them both. The rapidly growing child demands more metabolic energy than the human female body can ever possibly generate. If she keeps the child hidden safely inside the womb for just one more single month, the fire will completely burn out. She will literally starve from the inside, consumed entirely by her own incredible offspring. To match the physical maturity of other wild primates, to be born fully ready to hold on and naturally survive the wild, a human baby would need to stay inside the dark womb for roughly 9 more heavy months. But the maternal furnace cannot ever sustain that impossible massive burden. So nature forces a brutal, necessary eviction. The child is violently thrust out into the cold world prematurely. A human infant is essentially just a raw fetus, completely unfinished and utterly defenseless, continuing its fragile gestation in the harsh open air instead of the safe dark belly. It is born utterly helpless because the mother has beautifully sacrificed all the life energy she had left to give. She stood directly at the edge of profound exhaustion, protecting the future of our entire fragile species through sheer physical depletion. Her ultimate biological limits forced this desperate choice to carefully save them both from mutual destruction. Life must divide, or both will die. This incredibly fragile, unfinished life should have been the tragic end of our story. A mother holding a helpless infant cannot hunt. A mother nursing a demanding child cannot fight off hungry wolves. Alone in the freezing wilderness, a vulnerable mother and a useless baby are simply easy prey. To survive this brutal reality, humanity had to completely change its nature. They could no longer wander as solitary beasts. They had to gather together. They had to build a wall of living bodies against the terrifying darkness. The exhausted mother needed the man to stay and provide food. She needed the others to stand watch while she slept. The human tribe was not born from strength. The tribe was born from absolute weakness. The shared burden of the helpless infant forced fierce, primal hunters to sit down together around a central flame. Because the tiny child could not run, they had to stop. Because the helpless child feared the dark night, they created the roaring fire. Because the infant was completely useless, they became fully human. Love, loyalty, and deep social bonds were not romantic choices. They were desperate, necessary survival strategies. The profound biological weakness of our babies is the exact reason we built walls, forged weapons, and formed complex societies. Our greatest evolutionary advantage was never sharp teeth, thick fur, or running speed. Our greatest strength was the forced compassion required to safely keep our weakest members alive. This helpless infant was the true architect of human civilization. So tonight, as you sit safely in your brightly lit room, far away from the ancient howling forest, remember the brutal darkness that shaped us. We no longer fear the cold night. We no longer hide from wild predators. But our biology remembers. The next time you look at a newborn baby, helpless and crying in the bright light, do not just see a fragile, useless creature waiting to be saved. Look closer. See the immense sacrifice of that maternal burning fire. See the exact reason we learned to stand together around the flame. That tiny, defenseless life is not a biological weakness. It is the ultimate anchor that forced all humanity to stay closely together forever.